Please click the subscribe button and the notification icon. It will help us a lot.
Hi, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is the Creative Hustler Show. Today's guest is Skylar. Now, I'm kind of happy to have her here because she worked in Noria in the project from Carlos Baena, and we had an interview with him a long time ago when he was just first launching his Kickstarter. She's also a color key and visual developer pitch artist at Paramount Pictures, and she has worked for companies Mars Animation Planet, Sega, Toei Animation, and she was a concept artist in Google Daydream, augmented reality and virtual reality team. I think she's going to have a lot of amazing experience to talk to us here in this interview. So without any further introduction, welcome Eve.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, for those who do not know about you, can you tell us a little bit more about how did you started? How did you choose to go into art, and what pretty much put you up to virtual reality? Because I think this is a new topic that is going to change a lot how the industry makes things. But can you tell us your overall history about how did you get to this point?
Yes, definitely. So, back in high school, I was definitely already interested in art. I didn't know what kind of a career an artist would bring. I think at that time, everyone would say something along the lines that art is just a hobby or it's something not to be taken seriously. And so, for a while, I didn't really take it seriously. I just kind of dabbled in it. It was something I did on the side, took classes every now and then, but um, I studied something else actually. I went into UC Berkeley and I studied narrative theory under the English literature department. And then while I was there, I was starting to be really interested in film. And I was starting to watch anime too, especially stuff from Studio Ghibli, Miyazaki son's films. And of course, I grew up on with the Disney animation, feature animations. And I just fell in love with that, with the idea of storytelling through images. And so I started shifting gears towards animation. I went back to school. I started off in high school when I took those classes. I was at Art Center College of Design. And then I went back to art school. I ended up in the Bay Area for UC Berkeley. So I went to Academy of Art University and I studied visual development. Visual development at the time was a very small department. I think I could remember about 5 other people who was studying visual development with me. So
It's crazy that you say that because, to be honest, if I have to resume the most people that I see when I interview them or when I'm looking to interview,
uh-huh.
most of them are either character designers or visual developers.
Yes, exactly. It's a term that we can use freely now, and people understand what I mean. But back then, when they asked me, "What do you do?" I said, "Visual development." Nobody knew exactly what that was. It was they would ask, is that like illustration? Is that concept art? Do you fall under games or film or animation? Like people were still trying to figure out what the term actually meant. But now it's like now it's embraced. It's a term that's used in all those different industries I just mentioned, and we have a big community of artists that do visual development, which is exciting.
Nice. And well, since you had that experience of coming from this place where nobody knew what it was about, and now again, like this thing has exploded, like again, most people that I know either want to be a character designer or a visual developer, but it's rare to find somebody like years ago. I remember people saying that they wanted just to be an animator, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now it's all like character designer or visual development. But
Mm-hmm.
coming from that place, what do you think that has changed a lot? Let's say the way how visual development is written or how things work since those times and now.
Great question. I think. visual development, my understanding of it was when I started, it was more focused on inspirational art. I was doing a lot more illustrations. I think what would be considered now as color key production art or keyframe art. Um, and it at that time, the curriculum was finally starting to incorporate kind of more of the design aspect of it. So I would break down visual development as like inspirational art and then production art. So the production art is the stuff you make for like model sheets, turnarounds, and set designs, character costumes, props, like things that you start to really figure out the what the design exact specifics of it is, and then you hand that off to the 3D modeling team. I felt like that this aspect has gotten a lot stronger um, over the years. And so, as a visual development artist now, it's almost like expected that you also understand some 3D, whether that would be like SketchUp or maybe some ZBrush or especially as things are flowing into virtual reality as well. And virtual reality is very much coming into the animation world. Like we see a lot of the Google Spotlight, Goro Fujita, who's an artist. He's creating some interesting things from Story Studio with quilts. And so, as VR is coming, like we need, as visual development artists, we need to also have this a stronger understanding of 3D world as well.
Definitely. And probably you know this history because uh, I think it's going to be just for this commentary is going to be for the few people that do not know about this. But when Pixar came out and Toy Story had a boom and all these things happened, and then they joined Disney bought Pixar, they went up into this kind of mindset of just doing 3D movies and abandoning 2D animation.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much at that time, in the 90s, a lot of people was getting fired. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that most people do not know is that they actually offer the chance to not get fired to the people who will be willing to learn 3D. And there were
Mm-hmm.
a lot of artists, and I know a couple of them personally, who did not want to learn 3D animation. They got really mad. They got they just wanted to do 2D animation, and they got really close-minded about it. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously lost their jobs. And even to this day, they are not doing so well. Let's say, but
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that what I see in the creative world is that things keep always changing, and we have to keep learning new things,
Mm-hmm.
but not everybody is open to learning these things. So, how do you view about that mindset of adapting to new technologies? Because, well, I think you are one of the very, very first people in the world of going hard into VR and doing a project like that. Like, pretty much you're a pioneer working in these areas. So, because let's be honest, even today there's not many people doing those things, even at the smallest level.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you view this part of being a professional, of
Right.
needing to be adapting to new things, new environments, new rules?
I think you brought up a really good question. Like any time in our history, you're gonna see change. Technology will change. We see that in the music industry very clearly. I grew up with tapes, cassette players, and that's
Me too. Me too.
nobody uses that anymore. Maybe I can find one at Goodwill or something. But the point is that it shifted to CDs and then CDs is almost becoming really obscure now. We stream music now. It was first iTunes and then it became like Spotify, Pandora, all this stuff where we don't have to have a physical music device anymore. Um, so my point being is that we see in every industry it will go through very big upheavals. So we see it in the VFX industry as well, and I don't remember the timeline, but basically, it's almost like a race to the bottom of lowering prices. And so VFX artists is, you see the big boycott that happened. I want to say it was a few years ago. My timeline's a little iffy, but And now we've been seeing changes in the animation industry, and you brought up those changes as well. So I think for me, being an artist is someone that is always learning. I think you can push back as much as you want, like there's, of course, we're all human, so there's always that part of us. It's like we don't like change. We don't like when we have to learn something new and it feels uncomfortable being a beginner again. I certainly felt that way when I take up any kind of 3D software. But I think if you're an artist, you have to ask yourself what your goal is. And I think for me, it's trying to get across the ideas that are in my head. So I'm going to try to use every tool in my toolbox and new ones that I've never even heard of or learned before to try to get that vision across. So if it helps for me to be able to model this thing that I have in my head so that the next person can see it and they understand what they're looking at, I say we use whatever tools you can, if I can convey it in 2D, great. Like, I'll speak for myself. I feel like there are some concepts in my head that is difficult to convey in 2D. Like if I want to do some crazy tricks with the camera, that only perhaps in VR you can do those kinds of points of view. My point is that I think it doesn't hurt to help these things. In fact, it would actually make you a valuable artist. So then you are able to cross bridges and talk to the 3D department. You can talk to the engineers. You can, in a way, be involved in all parts of the pipeline. And I think that you're going to be a linchpin if you can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Back in the day when the iPhone came out, I was an IT guy. I was still years away from entering the creative industry and all that. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember, well, I recently had studied 2 years about learning to code and things like that. And back in the day, coding was strictly just for websites
Mm-hmm.
and very fixed websites and software and computer software. And then the iPhone came out, and that turned everything around because now we had like back in the day you had a website and it was a stock, and if you
Mm-hmm.
navigated in the website through the iPhone, which at the time was way smaller than it is now, like you will see tiny letters and you will have to zoom in and to try to navigate through all this thing. And now it came this idea of HTML5 where you have to
Mm.
learn a lot of styles to make the website adapt to the phone. Then that came psychology and entering into the user experience, user interface, that kind
Right.
of things, and we have to learn all of these things, and it was like really frustrating because now we we don't only need to learn new principles about functionality of the website, but we also had to learn a different way of coding that never
Mm-hmm.
existed before, so nobody could teach us. There was nowhere to ask about. We will
Right.
just have to sit down and see what worked. And yeah, I remember being at time kind of a little bit frustrating because again, many of my friends were just coming out of, oh, we finally know how to code, and it's like 1 year later, oh, everything that you know, throw it to the trash. You have to learn again. And he was like, no.
Totally. And it's I want to acknowledge there is that learning curve too, that frustration, that the hard time in which you're having to learn something new. And like you said, you may be watching your peers or friends kind of move ahead while you're doing this really hard thing and like trying to learn something new. But I do think it pays off in the end. I mean,
Definitely.
I also want to mention Glenn Keane. Like Glenn Keane, who's, he's kind of like the god of 2D animation. Um, and he's learned tilt brush. He's learned how to draw and paint in virtual reality in 3D space. And what he can achieve there, he says it's like a whole new world open up for him. And I got to watch one of his talks when he's painting in VR, and it's amazing. I think it's hard to describe. It's almost like what he can do in 3D space is just different. It's just a completely different thing than he was doing in 2D. Even though the foundations were there, everything he had ever learned in his lifetime, he was bringing it to 3D. But it's almost like the medium allowed him to do things maybe he might have not seen before.
Definitely. And this is something that I noticed as well from the people who really do amazing things in the end and people who just kind of go back through life is that they keep always learning. Like they keep
Yeah.
learning. And this is an industry, a very interesting one, by the way, because let's say if you see a sports like basketball, boxing, whatever, once you are 35, you're finished. Like you're
Mm,
old, you cannot do that anymore. Maybe you can push 2, 3 more years, but then you have to retire, and that's it.
mm,
And art, and as well as entrepreneurship, I think, is something that you can have like 19 years old and still learn,
yeah.
still the things. Like for example, my first interview with Fred Seibert, he's by at the time he was 63, and he says like I feel like I'm just starting out, like, and this is a guy who was
Yeah.
the president of Hanna Barbera, like in the 80s, and he says like I just feel like I'm barely starting out, and it's like that,
Yeah, totally.
and this is something amazing of art. Like if you truly love it, like uh, there's no need to retire if you don't want it, and well, you can see that as well in this guy with. Uh, Ghibli Studios, the guy from Ghibli,
Yes.
he
Yes.
retires, and then every 2 to 3 years, it's like, I'm out of retirement. I have an idea.
Exactly. Exactly. And I love that because I think, yes, as an artist, it's your career path is it's lifelong. It's as long as you choose it to be. And it took me a while to understand that. I think there's this sense, like you said, there's a sense of I need to, I don't know, climb the ladder, and then someday I will hit some sort of peak or something. There's this kind of sense that it was there was some timeline, and now I realize uh the art career is very non-linear. It kind of winds around and like meanders. It takes you to very unexpected places. For example, I think I've worked on various projects in terms of like from feature films to games to VR to AR. I've done also publishing and illustrations. It's just like it's a very interesting career because on one hand it will always be an adventure. Like it'll always be interesting and fun and exciting because you always feel like a newbie all the time. And then at the same time, it's like this feeling that it because it will never end. Like you have a long time. Like there's no rush. Like I think that's the one advice I would give young artists is like don't be in a rush. Like really experience your own art. Take your time.
Yeah, definitely. And when you see people trying to follow a similar path of what you have chosen, what is the most common mistake that you notice that they are not aware that they are doing?
Mm. I have to say the path that I'm going on, I feel like not very many people choose it actually because it is hard. They oft the path that people do choose is often to find a studio that they really want to work in, and apply like crazy and move up the chain there, move up the ladder there. And for that, I do see some common mistakes. Is that I feel like oftentimes artists don't really ask themselves why they're making the art. Um, if I get this a lot when people come up to me and say, how do I break into the industry? How can I get a job at Studio X? And they name a large studio of some sort. And when I ask them, like, okay, well, do you like working with 100,000 people? They're like, no, I like working in my own home by myself. I'm like, well, why do you want to work at the studio then, right? So it's just things like that where it's like, it's almost like they don't even ask themselves why they want a certain thing or why they're doing art in the first place. If, for example, another artist would come up to me and say, like, can you tell me how, I can improve on becoming like a good character designer? And I'm like, what do you like about character design? And they're like, I really like landscape painting. And so I get that a lot where I'm like, okay, well, maybe you haven't spent the time to think about like why. Why did you do art? Was it about the color? Was it about lighting? Was it about like did you like storytelling? Maybe you should be a storyboard artist and not, not a landscape painter or like vice versa. And so I think the common mistake I see is that they artists don't ask themselves why. Why am I doing this art? Why did I get into art in the first place? What am I trying to achieve with that art? um is it and why do you want to work at a particular studio? I think if they're looking for, I like that particular art style or I like specific things about that studio, then I think that's great and I fully support that. But if the answer is like, oh, I like the fame that comes with that title or something like that, I think you're in it for the wrong reasons. So yeah, I think as an artist, you should always ask yourself why you're doing something. The other mistake I think too that I see is the following the herd. I see this a lot, especially at conventions where I go up and down the aisle and almost all the art looks the same. Like it looks very similar to each other.
Oh
And
yeah.
yes, and it's great to like a style, to learn it, and to maybe you feel that it became your own style. But I just think that's a common mistake. It's just I see too much of young artists being impressionable, and their mentor did this one thing and they want to do that thing too, and they do that same exact thing, and it's as if I'm a studio or if I'm a recruiter and I'm like, okay, I'm looking for this one thing, I'm gonna hire the original person that that did that one thing. It's like so my point being is that while it's great to learn the trend and what's in right now, and it's good to learn why it works, and so like you break it down, you learn it, maybe you mimic it and you understand why it works. But then I think at the end of the day, you still have to find your own voice. That's what makes you different from another artist.
Yeah, definitely. And I think again, it's hard to see it when you are in that point of trying to get higher,
Mm,
and you're thinking, oh, maybe this is the safest path to get higher. Like, uh, do something that is commonly being used. And but again, as you say, like if I'm going to need this kind of a style, I can
mm-hmm.
always go and hire the guy who made it in the
Right.
beginning. So why hire another guy like that? And this is the hard part about art, I think, because you really don't know. Sometimes you really don't know what kind of art style fits the best until you see it,
That's right.
and you might have it, but if you're trying to copy, let's say, Adventure
Right.
Time, that I think is the most common one right now that is being copied, like. Uh, you might have the style that they are looking for, but if you're doing something else or if you're showing something else, then nobody's going to see you.
That's right. That's right. And I almost feel like you're hiding. Like as an artist, you're hiding behind someone else's art style and you're hoping to get hired for that someone else's art style. So, well, it's not bad. We all could understand like the hustle, for rent and to be paid. It's understandable, but I would argue whether that's the safest path. Like maybe it might get you hired for that one particular project, but in every studio they're working on two or three other films. But if you can only do Adventure Time and you can't do How to Tame Your Dragon, then it will see I will see that, and so then you'll probably be the first to be laid off, and I will hire the person whose portfolio has a variety that I can look at and say this person has a voice. They know they have a strong opinion about something, and they also could break down the trendy style or whatever is happening, and they could also do that, but they also have their own style as well.
Yeah, definitely. And well, something that I see as well, I think, and that usually the people that do some things like that, they also do this other thing, which is kind of the passivity, let's call it. And
Hmm.
I think this is maybe the root of all of this, the passive attitude. And the way I see it with many artists is that they think that this is still maybe the 80s or something like that, where where there will be some people or somebody who comes through your art and discovers you, let's
Mm,
say.
right.
And to be honest, like, that has changed a lot thanks to the internet. I
Mm-hmm.
think that this is really hard for many artists because many artists are very introverted or shy. And and yeah, like, you have to today, I think most people have to have a more aggressive strategy. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that they have to be aggressive in personality, but for example, let's say somebody trying to win a lot of Instagram followers to maybe get a job in the future, that's a
Mm-hmm.
passive strategy. You show
Mm-hmm.
in your portfolio to studios, to people who can actually hire you, and if you get rejected, talk to them like, why I got rejected, what can I improve in my portfolio, and learning how to do your interviews better and learning how to do your portfolio better. Like, that is aggressive strategy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually taking action in improving the way how you present yourself, how you sell your own art. And through that is like, and the people who are doing that are the people who are getting hired, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the people who are just waiting there to get a lot of Instagram followers to maybe get a job in the future, like, some people have gotten some results like that, but let's be honest, it's not most people. As you say,
Mm-hmm.
most people get hired because they apply relentlessly to the studios.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree with you. I think I like the word proactive, like someone who is very
Yes.
proactive about what they want and they go for it. Like I have the saying where it's like I rather hire like a say there's an artist who's an A artist, a person that's like amazing, everything in their portfolio is like looks absolutely like a professional and maybe of high caliber and but I don't really know them. Versus a B artist, someone that's like, okay, they do good stuff. Maybe it's not quite great yet. Maybe they're missing that last 5-10%, but they're proactive. If they email me, they're like, hey, can you give me feedback? How can I get better? Blah, blah, blah. I'm more willing to hire this person because they show initiative, and they show interest, they show investment, in their and it shows growth, like growth mentality that they want to get better. So you make a great point. I think it's not enough just to do good artwork anymore. It's like, oh yay, here's my portfolio, please hire me, right? There's this feeling of like people are waiting to be chosen. I think now this day and age, it's the choose yourself age. I think that it's coined by James Altucher. He wrote a book about it. It's called Choose Yourself. But the idea is that you can't sit around wait around for people to choose you. Especially, we have the internet, we have YouTube. Like there is no excuse anymore for you not to show your work somehow, um, and that's being proactive. So whenever artists ask me like, how do I break in? My answer is like, you should be doing the thing that you want to be doing in the first place. So they're like, how do I become an art director? I'm like, you should be art directing things like your stuff, your friend's stuff. I don't care. Like, do the thing that you want to be doing already and put it out there. Like, put it on YouTube, put it on your Twitter. Go to conventions, get a booth and showcase your art, talk to investors. You know what I mean? So it's like it's not enough just to do, yay, I have pretty artwork, I hope somebody chooses me. You have to really go out there and become the artist and the person you want to be.
Definitely. And what you just said reminded me of two people. One is this guy is Ramit Sethi.
Oh
Now,
yes.
this guy is not normal.
Yes.
The way he thinks is very different to other people. And so, for example, just to show on this principle that you just talked, this guy had a group of friends whose
Mhm.
hobby was pretty much applying for jobs, even
Yes,
though
I remember that.
they didn't wanted a job. They just wanted to apply for jobs because that way, if they got rejected, they could get the feedback to improve their resume and also get this experience of the interviews. And they will put out they will group out together and say like, okay, these are the questions that they ask me, and they will plan ahead on how to answer the best possible way each question. And they realized like there were common questions that they ask in all the interviews. There were some others that they never thought about, and pretty much dedicated a lot of hours into doing that. and
Mhm.
and the other guy, and again, like this guy is not normal because I do not know many people who naturally will have come with an idea like that. And the other guy is Tim Ferriss.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And again, like this guy is a guy who has to pitch ideas, investors, the things he did a lot. And he says that one of the things that he does pretty much every day, and he started doing it because of Chase. I think Chase Jarvis told him to, was that whenever he went to Starbucks, he will try to negotiate to get a discount just
Mhm.
because.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
reason was the same, like as you say, to start small, because if you're planning that once you get the opportunity of your life, you will that you will perform perfectly there when you never had any kind of
Mhm.
practice, like that
Mhm.
is ridiculous.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I love that you mentioned those two people. Yeah, and then I think among them is like Seth Godin, James Altucher. Those
Oh
four
yes.
people, I think, in my mind, uh, is helpful to learn, like as artists, because what they do really well is pitch. And I feel like especially as a visual development artist, that's what you're doing. You're pitching your artwork, you're pitching the story, you're pitching, you're trying to get executives to say yes to this film idea. um, and so in every level, as a viz dev artist, you're always pitching. You're pitching to your senior artist above you. You're pitching to your coworker who's like, "Hey, wouldn't this be a good idea if we added this thing in the scene?" So I feel like it's a skill that artists need. It often doesn't come natural. I'm a bit of an introvert, a little bit shy, but I had to practice that, like in order to get your ideas across. Like it doesn't help if you have this really incredible idea but you just keep it to yourself. You have to put it out there. And so I think it's great to practice and get rejected over and over again, because that's gonna be how you will have to perform at a higher level. Like if you're gonna end up in the studio of your dream, or the dream job of your dream, like you're gonna have to be pitching a lot, and be okay and have the resilience to bounce back from failures and rejections.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something, again, like I understand you because I used to be very shy, very introverted as well. So I really understand where you come from. But again, like there, many people who know me now, they will think that I'm an extrovert, and I'm still like, if I do psychological tests, uh, it still comes up as I am an introvert because, for
Hmm.
example, well, something that I discover is that when I'm with really good people, like they do not tire me at all. So I just get energized by them. But
Hmm.
so I have to be very picky with the people that I socialize with. But
Hmm.
on the other side, like the reason why I was able to develop this kind of social skills was because I was starting to putting myself out there,
Mm.
and started doing like small challenges. And I talked about this in another podcast episode. But there was a guy that I found out that he was like a very extreme case of introvert. So he made a really huge challenge. He pretty much went out of the street. I think he was in San Francisco, and he now this is a guy who, if you look at him, like uh, he's he's very strong, like has a lot of muscle, and he went out dressed with a ballet tutu with
That's
a
great.
pink, and to make things worse, he strapped a dildo in his head
Oh my
and went
gosh.
out to walk out in the streets for the whole day. Now I didn't do something crazy as that, but I did went to my challenge was a little bit less extreme. but I went to a mall in my country, and pretty much it's the biggest mall in our country, and and it's like long, pretty much. It starts in one place and begins in another, kind of a long way. And since I got to the mall, to the entrance, I start singing in the rain,
Oh, that's
all
awesome.
along south,
Hmm.
and kind of dancing as well while I'm singing. And I went through the whole mall singing that. I had a lot of reactions.
That is so awesome. And it's a great
And
song too.
yes,
No
and many
children.
of them were good. Like many of them were like really good. Now, for somebody who was scared of socializing, uh, the first thing that comes out is that you will get negative reactions to you, and when you do something so extreme and you get loud thing, and you get people closing to you in a nice attitude, things like that, after doing something so extreme, it is really hard to feel afraid of normal situations.
Totally. I think that's great that you did that, and that's a good example of it because I think a lot of artists are shy, and it's yeah, it's like they need to get out there and show yourself, and otherwise we won't ever know the beautiful art that you have behind you. So,
Definitely. Now, in your career, well, something that happened to me, just to give you a little bit of context, is that when I started my business, or where I started anything pretty much, usually have some ideas of the things that can go wrong and things that where I can find hardship. And what I always end up discovering is that one, they never happen, or two, if
mm,
they happen, they are not as hard as I thought they will be. But the really hard things were things that I never that came up and I never even expected. Like I never even thought
mm.
about them. Now, on the spirit of finding out the things that we don't know, what was something that you didn't expect at all in your career that became true and is really important for you?
Hmm. I think. Let me think for a moment. What I didn't expect, but it happens. Is that the question?
Yeah, could be a principle, could be something else, something that you use every day to
Hmm.
to be a good artist.
Okay, yeah, I think I have a few examples. um, I think there's this feeling of so in my mind there was like a feeling of a worst case scenario, and that would be that like I'm an imposter or something. I think imposter syndrome is a feeling of that someone might call me out and say, "Hey, you're not good enough. Who are you? And why are you here? Why should we listen to you?" That kind of thing, right? And I think especially when you're an artist, you're making art that's really personal to you. So there's that fear of it being called out and say like this isn't good enough. And so it was a fear. I wasn't expecting it to happen, but it did, right? And so there was a senior artist from a top name studio who basically looked at my art and called it on it and say this isn't good enough. And they also said something along the lines like I don't want to work with you on this project or something like that. So it it came from left field for me. It was this feeling of like, oh, I hope it never happens, but it did. And so it was like a big punch to the gut, and it definitely took me a long time to recover from that. But what I didn't expect was that you survive. I think it was the feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die, and I'm gonna burn bridges, and these people will talk about me behind my back or something like that. There's this like intense fear, like I could no longer survive, in the industry, having been called that I was not good enough or something like that. And now I kind of look back on that moment in this uh and appreciate it. It's a really weird thing to say, I think, but it's like I'm glad they said that when I was a younger artist because it really motivated me to it took me a while, but I was finally able to face it and said to myself that like, okay, yes, there were things I didn't know and things that I because I didn't know them, I was not good at them. like technical skills. And but then I took the time to actually learn it and really sit with that tension, with that pain, or that, I guess the word is like shame. Like I felt ashamed of being called that I was not good enough. But after sitting with it and being able to face it and say, okay, maybe they were right on certain areas and I could improve in these technical skills and figure that out. And then they were also not right in certain areas in the way that's like, there is a difference between having good taste and having good vision versus not having the technical skills to achieve that vision. And I think back then as a young artist I couldn't see the difference. I just associated like I am a bad artist like that. I'm not good enough, right? There's this feeling it's like I was forever doomed or something like that, that I was not changeable or something, that I could not overcome it or something. And then looking back, obviously now, having been through that, I can say with confidence and say it didn't mean that I didn't have good taste. It didn't mean that the idea wasn't good or that the vision wasn't good, but that perhaps I just did not physically, technically, did not have the skills to communicate that idea that I had in my head. And so I think it was such a valuable learning lesson for me. It's almost like separating your self worth from the hard work and the value you put on yourself as a person. I think those three things we often, as an artist, because it's so art is personal, we tend to like put them all together. But there's, I think, a big difference between the self worth, which means I deserve it. I deserve recognition, or I deserve for my work, and I deserve kindness, whatever that is, versus the hard work. Like, did I earn it? Did I put in the time? Did I put in the effort? Did I put in the skills as best as I can to have earned whatever title or place or accolades, or project, whatever that is. And then the last thing is value. Did I bring value that matched what they needed? So, for example, it's like I can say, I deserve to be treated well. I earned because I worked hard throughout my 10 plus years of a career. But is the value correct? And that may not be. For example, if I was an environment artist and yet I applied to a character job, it's like I'm valuable. I have 10 plus years of experience in this one particular thing, but does it match the value that they are looking for, like the recruiters or the studios looking for? Or in my case, the mentor who or the senior artist who told me that I was not good enough, it's like somehow I was not communicating well in my art what I had in my head. That person didn't get it, right? So now that was a good lesson in like, okay, how can I communicate better? Well, I need to learn the technical skills to up my game so that the art reflects what I had in my head, and as well as, was that what he was looking for? Even if I had all the amazing skills in the world and I'm a master at the art and I present it to this person, it may not be what they were looking for. And so I think it's the trying to understand that value is very subjective, especially in art, but not to conflate your self-work, the hard work, and like effort, and the value that you bring. So trying to separate those three things.
Yeah, this concept of value, this is something that I was taught by one of my mentors early on when I started entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Is that he advised me to study a lot this concept of value because uh, the way he meant is that what is valuable to one person is not valuable to another. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, for me, let's say uh, a basketball will not mean a lot because I'm not that much into basketball. But
Mm-hmm.
let's say give that basketball to LeBron James, and that means like several $1 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
so in art is very hard this kind of thinking because again like your art might look the most amazing thing to one person and to another person will look like shit, pretty
Right.
much.
Or they don't get it or whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is hard, and that is really important to understand as well, because especially when people are young, like they see, let's say, some recruiter at Disney, and if they get rejected, they might think that it's like the whole
Right.
company that rejected them. Like they just went into a
Right.
whole meeting, watched the portfolio, and every single person in Disney say like this portfolio is shit. Don't hire this person, right? But it's not like
Right.
you might have. You might have bad luck. Maybe
Right.
that person specifically that was interviewing you didn't like your style, and maybe if you had gone to another recruiter, maybe that other recruiter will have liked that style. So it,
Exactly.
that happens.
It totally happens. It's definitely happened to me before where I got rejected by one recruiter, but then two others from the same company liked my work. So it depends on the project that they're also scouting for, because they could be scouting for different projects. The other thing is that what I like to say is that when someone rejects you, it's not an outright no. Like, don't think of it that way. And this is only in art, specifically in art. It could mean later, not now. It could mean, hey, improve this and come again, like that, right? So it's kind of like, basically, like you said, it's the value changes person to person and through time too. So the same person who shows me maybe like a bad portfolio can come back in 3 months and show me, and I would be impressed, you know. So it really depends. So again, value is subjective, and I say don't wait to be chosen. Just keep applying and choose yourself. Like make your own. There's no reason for you not to publish your own stuff without waiting for someone.
Yeah, I think with artists today, and I think this is only going to become stronger when you decide to become a professional artist. There is this concept of the self-authoring, and pretty much that you have to become the own author of your own life.
Hmm.
And this sounds kind of a little bit, I don't know, weird, because it's not a common concept, but that has a lot of weight, because pretty much you have to take this attitude that you are absolutely responsible for everything that happens in your life,
Hmm.
and nobody else. So for example, if you got rejected again by a recruiter or something like that, uh, it might not be your art. It might be the way you presented it. It might be
Hmm.
the way you pitch it. It might be the portfolio that you built, or the way how you build your portfolio.
Hmm.
So you need to pretty much take responsibility in perfecting every little thing, like, and finding out which thing is working and which is not. And again, coming
Hmm.
back to Ramit Sethi, like this guy, eventually, when he actually wanted to have a job, he will develop a resume for each position. Like, he's not,
Hmm.
and most people just do one resume and pretty much send it away to 100 positions and see if they get hired. No, this guy was designing his entire presentation for each position in each company. Even if the position was the same, the company might be looking uh, different values, different goals. So he will
Hmm.
adapt it. He will adapt it to this. So on that way, I think we have to be the authors on our own life, and
Hmm.
also be the authority on our own life. Like,
Yes. And about the whole resume, designing it for every job application, I definitely agree. Like, you have to do that. Way too many times I get a portfolio that has nothing to do with what I'm looking for, And so you need to take the care. If you actually really want to work there or wherever you want to work, you should learn everything you can about them and tailor your resume and your portfolio to what they're looking for. And there were a lot of success stories I've had where I actually used Ramit Sethi's concept.
strategies.
Yeah, he had a concept of a briefcase technique. So
Oh
basically,
yes.
yeah, exactly. I've gotten a few projects that way where I came into the interview and I presented to them, hey, I made a complete new portfolio just for you. This is in your art style, the story that you're working on, that you're developing in the next few years. And they look at them, you're hired, because you're doing exactly what we're looking for already. There's no need for me to train a new artist to make it that particular style I'm looking for. So several times that technique has worked for me, and I think it's important because at the heart of it, you're fulfilling a need as an artist. You're asking, whether that's the recruiter or the studio, like what do they need? Okay, they need an artist that can do XYZ, right? So you want to you want to make sure you fit XYZ in your resume and your portfolio. And that's one way, right, of getting a job. There's multiple ways. Like you can be the true rebel and say, I'm not going to do XYZ. I'm just going to build my own crazy storytelling, out there portfolio. But maybe that's the thing that one particular person's looking for, and they need that, and they will hire you. So again, it really depends on the value that you're presenting and the value that the people who need you are looking for.
Definitely. And if you were to meet like a young student with a lot of talent who is about to enter, let's call it the real world,
Hmm.
what advice would you give that person, and what advice should that person ignore?
Okay. I think, yeah, I think going along with the lines of what we're talking about, it's understanding your market. Like, I think it's helpful for the artist to really look what is trending, what is happening in the film industry or whatever industry they're working on. I really suggest reading the newspaper, like getting all kinds of news that is related to your field. Like, I subscribe to tech stuff as well, AR, VR stuff, as well as animation and film and games, because I want to know what's happening in the market and what's the trend, what productions are happening at the moment, what's going to be happening, what's the lineup in the next few years, what kind of style are they going for, all this stuff is really important. And balance that and figure out like where you fit into that spectrum, or if you don't, right? And I think balance between understanding the market but also developing your own voice too, because the whole understanding the market and say you tailor your work to whatever's trendy, that can only get you there. It may land you the job, but then what about the next project that's different in within the same studio? So again, I think it's balancing between understanding the market but also developing your own voice, and that's going to take time. That's going to take several years. So it's better to get better to get started while you're young. Is figure out what your own voice is, and while you're at it too, it's kind of like it's very cliche to say, but it's like enjoy the journey, because when you're young and young artist, you can take a lot of risk. Like you can screw up and you can make like experimental paintings and weird stuff that nobody will ever see, and that's great. This is just for you to figure out what your style is, right? When you become a kind of mid-tier to senior artist, when you make mistakes, people see it more and people point it out more. And so, enjoy the journey, and every step there's a pro and a con aspect to your career. So while you're a young artist, like make all the mistakes you can make, like make the first 10,000 mistakes. So you will be a master by that time if you make all those mistakes early in your career.
Yeah, I think something that we should be changing in society itself is this concept that we tend to give young people that, oh, you're young, you should focus on enjoying your life and things like that. And it's like, okay, I'm not saying do not enjoy your life or to stop going to parties and things like that, because there are definitely some experience that you will only enjoy when you're young, or that you can only do when you're young. But
Hmm.
at the same time, what you just mentioned is really, really true. It's really, really important. Like, uh, this is a place where you don't have like really huge responsibilities.
Mhm.
You can screw up as much as you want, and there will not be anything really bad happening. Like
Right.
it is way easier to screw royally up when you are
Right.
22 than when you have 35 years old and you have already two kids and you have a
Right.
house that you're paying and a car that you're paying. So there is a lot of things that you can experiment and you can do that when you're young. And I think people should be trying to focus a little bit more on their careers when they are young into trying
Mhm.
to experiment, even going to entrepreneurship like really hard
Mhm.
for 2 years. So like there's this guy Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's like one of the guy who says a lot like if you're young you should at least try to live 2 years with a group of friends in a very cheap apartment eating
Mm.
maruchan and
Mhm.
eating noodles and pretty much trying to build up something there, because there are many things that maybe you are naturally good at, but you do not know about it because you never try them.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and all these careers with art, entrepreneurship, and things like that, there is a lot of areas that you need to actually invest a lot of time and a lot of effort before you realize uh, where you're good at or
Mhm.
what are your skills. And there is no other way so far that I know that you can actually do this other than investing at least 2 years and going full in into something like again in art and entrepreneurship, things like that.
You kind of have to jump in and take a leap and experiment and figure out where that leads you. I have to say, probably some of the most interesting career paths is because of that, because of like taking a leap, taking a chance. You know, maybe there's a little bit naivete too, like as a younger artist, where you're just like, oh, okay, I think this sounds crazy, I'll go for it. Whereas I think when you have, say you're an art director, you have people depending on you, you have a team depending on you, you're less likely to make crazier jumps or like riskier, experimental art styles, right? You I'm saying you should, and I think at every step of the way an artist should try to always be risk taking, but it is easier to make those kinds of chances when you're younger.
Definitely. And probably the answer to this question is the experience that you told us about before, but just in case there is another one, I will ask it. Uh, have you ever had a failure or something that appeared like a failure in the moment that has set you up for later success in the future?
Yeah, I would say it's the similar. There's two incidences I remembered. So one is the one that I had mentioned before, where it felt like a failure, but coming out of it, I felt like I learned so much about the true value of hard work, and that it made me stronger and more resilient to criticisms and to rejections. And one of the other things I learned is that everyone it's like empathy, basically, like everyone has whatever situation they're dealing with. So I was able to go back and talk to that senior artist who had kind of felt like I had put me down or something like that. And at that time they were just going through a really tough time or something, and it almost had nothing to do with me. It's kind of painful to find out afterwards, but it's kind of like, basically, it's like not like the people we look up to, our heroes, our mentors, our art seniors, like they don't always know everything. They're human too. They make mistakes. And then I thought if I was ever in his position, I may make a mistake too. Just like, I mean, I hope not. So like I was hoping, like the thing I learned was that I want to be able to mentor artists. And I want to be, whenever, if I'm in a position that I would care about that person, and even though maybe their work may not be as good, I would help them, get to a place where they could be happy with their work too. So this is one of the reasons why I jumped on this podcast to do with you. And it's just one of my philosophies in life, is to kind of give back to the art community and to remember what it was like when I was the younger artist, and to maybe it would help if they had a guide or like a helping hand through all the hard, emotional stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And well, first of all, thanks for giving your time. Just to let you know a little bit on the history of how this started. Like uh, we are from El Salvador, so we pretty much, if you see the news, that is not a country that is in a really good place. But the thing is that here there is no opportunities at all. Like, and the art schools suck. They all suck. Like, we
Mm,
don't have any decent art school here locally, and the closest thing you can get to art in a career here so far is graphic design, pretty much.
mm,
But pretty much thanks to the internet, we were able to start like getting uh, more information and learning things and things that they don't teach here. And at some point, things got really, really bad, and entrepreneurship was like the only way out. And but back that time, it sounded crazy, like the idea of putting an online business and make a lot of money. That sounded kind of like a scam, but but ended up giving us way better results than the jobs that we got here. But still, we didn't have like a lot of knowledge, and I started like the podcast, interviewing people, trying to find out all the things that I didn't knew about. And for me, it was kind of crazy, as you mentioned, that these people who have won Oscars, Emmys, Annies, like all the people who have directed the movies that I've been seeing from since I was a kid, and and as you say, like we in the beginning we kind of see them like gods, and then you meet them, it's like they are normal persons.
yes.
And that is our when you understand that at a very visceral level, like it's really powerful, because then you really really understand that if you actually put in the work to improve your knowledge, improve your mindset, uh, uh, doing the things, like really doing the things and investing into all these things, that you can do way more than you think of. And and yeah, again, like for me, the podcast has been kind of the college for me,
Hmm.
to learn all these things that otherwise I will never have learned. So from my end, like really, really thank you that people like you exist, and that people like you are very open to share their experience and knowledge, because uh, I think that is one of the most amazing things that the internet has given us, that we can be from another country where there is no opportunities, and we can still tap into these markets and opportunities and get the jobs that we wanted.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's so amazing what you're doing, and you're right at the right time of the internet age too, and it's a much needed resource. I can relate because I came from a country that's pretty poor, and there's not very much resources there as well. So I just think it's amazing that you've built up this community of people that can, they have access to your podcast and can learn through the internet and what you do. So that's really amazing.
On a note, just making a note, many of these questions I have gotten them from Tim Ferriss and Ramit Sethi, and also John
Oh
Lee
my gosh.
Dumas.
That's great. These are some of my favorite authors that I read, and it certainly has helped me in my career.
Yeah, when I started the podcast, I was like, okay, we have to have like really good questions.
Yeah.
And Tim Ferriss and Ramit Sethi were the first guys who came to my mind.
I love them. I love these questions. They're challenging, and but they really, I think it gets to the heart of things, and makes it vulnerable in a good way.
Definitely. And whenever you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do to get back to your center and keep working?
Yes, that happens a lot. So, especially as an artist, you're tapping a lot into your own energy reserve, and you're trying to create art that's personal and emotional, and so yeah, I do get overwhelmed. I tend to, I don't know, like go to yoga, meditate, I nap, I take a rest. One of my favorite things to do is just walk around the city, and I live in San Francisco, so it's easy to get from one neighborhood to another. I love just kind of absorbing the sounds of the city, like riding the bus and listening on people's conversations, and or like stopping by Chinatown and seeing like the clinks of glasses, and like people shopping for their grocery, and like, or there's something about the sounds of the city that puts me at ease, and in a way. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. Turn this off. Sorry.
No problem. I'll edit it.
So basically the sounds of the city, I feel like, also helps me to solve problems. Like, so for whatever I'm being overwhelmed about, just by walking around and doing something else, taking yourself out of the desk, I think gives you new perspective. And oftentimes, just walking around the city, I get new ideas about how to solve visual problems or story problems. For me, it's visual development always comes down to personal, like what is personal about this piece, like why am I making it? And so by walking around seeing other people too, you remember, you're like, oh, there's a daughter who's looking at a dog, and they're interacting in this very vulnerable way, or something like that, and you try to bring that back into the art, and you come back to your desk and you're able to solve that thing that was missing. Or so basically, yeah, just taking a break from your desk. I think too many artists get too I don't know what the word is, but they get too focused, and I think that they're the kind of artists like, I wake up at 5 and I'm just gonna do art all day at my desk until 9 p.m. And I feel like you need to experience life in order to put life in the paper on the art. So I do think you need, when you get overwhelmed, you need to step away.
Definitely. And coming back to this, this is a question that I took from Young Lee Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire, and I think this is the hardest question that I have ever seen in my life.
All right, let's try it.
Okay, so let's say you wake up tomorrow and you wake up in a different dimension, very similar to this one. You have your house, you have all the things that you need to your art, but you do not have your art, and nobody knows about you. But you have all your knowledge, your experience, all your skills, and you have $500 in your pocket. What do you do to get back to this position, professionally speaking, as soon as possible?
Oof, that is hard. That's a good one, huh? Let's see. $500 doesn't get, unfortunately, in San Francisco, doesn't get you too far.
Yeah, I have noticed that Los Angeles and San Francisco is obscenely
Yeah,
expensive,
it's so
like
crazy. So crazy.
unnecessarily expensive.
I agree. I am only here because I have rent control. So I think the first step is to get a job. And it almost at this moment does not matter what job you get, because you need to have more income than that $500. And so in the past, I've gotten any jobs from, like, especially when I was starting out, retail jobs. I worked as a coffee barista, and all these jobs had helped me at least bring in income to continue doing your art. So at least for the time being, to get just even to supplement, to get any kind of income, at least get a job that doesn't tire you emotionally, that will allow you to still work on your art at night. So basically a day job of some sort. And then I would build a website. I would build not just a website, but a community of artists online. So I would reach out to either Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Basically, if I don't have the connections, if people don't know me in this new dimension, I need to start making the reconnecting with the industry. So, you figure out who is working where, you figure out who do you need to talk to get a job in the art. I would also start applying to any kind of freelance I find online. That way I'm still making art, and the art brings money, as well as the day job will supplement rent and all that. But since I have all my equipment to do art, that's really the next step is just you just produce as much as you can, as fast as you can, the art that brought you to this position, I guess. And in a weird way, it's almost like I think I would overhaul my entire portfolio to begin with, because oh, sorry, were you saying something?
Uh, no, no, just hearing.
Because I think the way the portfolio and all that stuff had been laid out was, it's kind of like knowledge from maybe 2 3 years ago, and I think the industry and just the internet has changed so much by now that I think the portfolios need to look different. It's almost like we need to include a portfolio that can be 360. Right now, everything like on the screen is just a 2D thing, like it's flat. We need a way to be able to present 360 VR paintings and AR products, through websites, through portfolios, or um, basically the way we do portfolios is so outdated now. I would try to figure out, in this, if I'm in a new dimension, I might as well start a new way of, presenting portfolios or something like that. And then I would sign up for every free trial of softwares that I need, like, Photoshop and like SketchUp and all of that. Um, and basically, yeah, connect with the people that make either hiring decisions, or you do your own stuff. So for example, there's like Patreon, where you create art and you can get subscribers, like a monthly subscribers who will fund your art. They'll pay whatever X amount of dollars to see you do demos and make custom brushes for them and things like that. So I know a few artists that have made their living that way, and they basically live off that. They just make art and make demos and make brushes, and that suits them. But what I think is amazing about that is that they've created a platform for themselves to speak about their art, and people come to them about their art, instead of the other way around, in which what we have now, which is, as artists, is we're always like slogging our portfolio to many different people saying, please hire us, please hire us. I think we need to rethink about how we present our art. um, and so I think that would be another way, is just finding a way to make your own platform, so that you have more control over your own content and the traffic that goes to your art. Um, and I would create a community that way, like a community of other artists, like a atelier online of some sort, because I think it's amazing that we have so many artists from all around the world, and yet it's almost like we only concentrate in LA or SF or New York, right? And it's like, it's really strange to me, especially having come from another country, that it's almost like we're overlooking all the artists that are from everywhere else. And so for me, I would create an online like collaboration atelier of some sort, similar to how we did Lenoria. Basically, artists worked from wherever they were living in, whatever country they were living in. We had artists from all over the world contribute to the film through online. So I think that's amazing. We're at a time now that we can do that.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. And this is something that happened as well with the guys of Sun Creature when they were doing this animation called the Reward. Pretty
Mm.
much the animation was so amazing that they had volunteers from all over the world, like even South America, contacting them and saying them like, I will fly to Denmark, I will pay my whole stay and all these things. I just want to help you create this project. And for him, it was like a really crazy experience that people from all over the world were offering their help for free just to see a project being finished. But I think it's also at the, like a proof of the good things that came because
Mm.
of the internet.
I totally agree. I think that's so amazing. And I think we need more of that now. Like, yeah, I just feel like we often get insular in the animation industry. It's almost like we keep doing the same stories, we keep doing the same styles, and like we need to be injected with new forms of expressions. And I think one of the ways to do that is to have to open it up into a world collaboration.
Yeah, and again, like I think it's really important talking about these things even today because I've been mentioning this in the last episodes, but I think because of how the news work,
Mm-hmm.
they are getting desperate to get ratings because nobody's watching them anymore because everybody goes to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
In that desperation, they have been trying to put out a lot of bad news because that is an easy way to get reactions from people and people watching them. But at the same time, I see, like for example, here in El Salvador, we have given a couple of speeches here to the artist community,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the biggest questions that comes up every time is like this fear that, oh, but how am I going to go and apply in the United States? Like they are racist and all these things. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like I have never experienced race. Like the art community is one of the most open and supporting and amazing things I have ever met in my life. Like I never seen anything bad happen. At least to me, I
Mm-hmm.
never had any bad experience happening, and it's crazy, but these people believe it because they are getting so bombarded with bad news, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and I'm trying to no, like things is amazing. Like again, look at my podcast, look at the people who have accepted me, like people who in theory, the narrative should be like this guy in this huge corporation winning Oscars, and then it's like, oh, he's too important and he's not going to pay attention to what a guy from a very small studio in a third world country wants. Like that should be the narrative, right? And reality, what is happening is I sent an email, I sent a tweet, and they say, oh yeah, sure, let's do it. It's like
Yeah.
the most amazing thing in the world is, and it keeps happening. Like the only reason why the podcast has gone to so many episodes is because people keep saying yes, and when they say no, it's usually because, look, I'm really uh, uh, buried in work right now. Contact me in another 3 months.
Right. Exactly. I think
So
artists are the most generous people I've met. Okay. I think maybe some are not, but most of the time they are.
yeah, for example, there is this guy, the guy from Adventure Time. Like he even answered me, and the only reason why he said no was because he's really shy. Like really
Mm-hmm.
amazingly shy, and he accepted one interview in Cartoon Network and after that interview he felt so anxious that he said like, I'm never going to take interviews ever again. And
Oh,
that's the reason why. And he had nothing, like
right.
it's something that I completely understand.
Totally.
But yeah, definitely. I think we really need to be talking more about the good stuff and how amazing this industry is in many ways. Because uh, I truly think that in this industry, if you have the right attitude and if you are willing to put in the work and invest in the time of developing yourself as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
you have open doors.
I agree too. Like, I think you said it perfectly. Like, I think it's you do good work, do good art, but you also need to be a good person, meaning that like you're collaborative, you're willing to be forward looking and inclusive and enthusiastic. That goes a long way. Just someone being like, I really want to work on this, or I'm excited about this. Like some of my amazing opportunities came that way, just from me expressing interest and like, oh, that would be really cool, I would love to work on that. Like, really? Okay, yeah, great, you're on. So I think we need more people, more artists, just to have that kind of mindset. And yeah, you would be rewarded for that.
Yeah, and again, like in these interviews, every time that I met somebody who runs in a studio or who has been in a lot of position of being the ones who hire other people, they always tell me like they would rather hire somebody with decent skills but with the right attitude.
Mm-hmm.
That's somebody who is amazingly talented
Yeah.
and with a shitty attitude. And many of the times they will tell me I would rather develop this guy for 5 years as an artist, but
Yep.
not having to deal with, as long as I don't have to deal with a bad attitude.
Yes, I agree.
And on the other side, on the maybe not so obvious part, is that I think, if I remember correctly, Nathan Fox was the one who told me
Mhm.
this story. Was that they were working in a project, and there were a lot of people there, obviously. So, but there was this guy who was an amazing artist who never gave a problem either. He
Mhm.
will just go to his desk, put up the like huge headphones in his head, and do the work, and never
Mhm.
talk to anybody. But again, like he didn't have, he wasn't given any problem. He wasn't like these guys who maybe do that, and then when they get asked some changes, they get mad or something like that. No, he was a perfect professional,
Mhm.
but he was just getting to his desk and putting his headphones and not talk to anybody.
Right.
Now, what that happened is that in the middle of this project, there was something happened. He didn't say what, but pretty much the budget got shortened,
Mhm.
and they had to make decisions on who will they fire.
Right.
And pretty much, since everybody knew each other,
Right.
and and firing somebody who was your friend and who you get along with will create some kind of friction.
Right.
The obvious choice was to fire the guy who, even
Mhm.
though did perfectly professionally speaking, by firing him, like there will be no friction at all. Like the
Mhm.
team will not be affected uh,
Right.
negatively, emotionally speaking. So they fire him just because he didn't got along with other people, and it's kind of harsh to think that way, because I have not met many people who they just want that in their life. Like, look, I just want to do my work and that's it. I
Right.
just want to be left alone. But again, you have to value the human element when it comes to working in
Right.
teams, especially.
Right. Especially in animation or film, like it's a very collaborative process. You cannot be alone. Like you can't do things alone. We need to talk to each other. We need to collaborate. And yeah, that story makes sense to me.
Definitely. And is there any last advice that you would like to give into this interview, or that we haven't touched into this interview yet and you think is important?
Hmm. Yes, actually. There's one is to leap. Basically, you're never ready. Like I think for a long time I was always, I'm gonna wait till I'm really ready to, apply for something, or there's always this kind of limitation that I had put on myself, like I'm never ready. I'm not yet ready like that. But sometimes you just need to leap even when you're not ready. And oftentimes that's where I've grown the most, and where I've been given like the most amazing opportunity, like working with Carlos Baena, was just leaping. I wasn't ready, but I leapt anyways. Um, and so that's one thing. It's just like sometimes you just need to go for it. And then the other thing is, going along with the don't wait to be chosen. Like you need to ship things. So there's a saying, and especially in the Silicon Valley world, it's like ship it, build it, and then
Yes.
share it. Like don't keep the stuff to yourself. Like if you have ideas, like make it and share it with the world, and make sure people see it, because oftentimes we already have what it takes to succeed. It's just we often hide it and not show up and not ship things and not share things. So ship it, build it, share it. And then lastly is I think the one, out of all our interview questions today, I think I keep wanting to go back to this phrase. It's by Seth Godin. It's who's it for? Like what's your art for? Who's it for? And the idea that it's often not for everyone. So I've worked on projects before where they want the art to be universal. The idea is like,
Yeah.
oh, make it so that an old person would like it as well as a baby will like it. Make it so that, like my grandma from, I don't know, Texas will like it, but also like an immigrant from Indonesia would like it too, or something like that. So there's this sense of like make the art universal, but art is very opinionated and art is very personal. The more you try to make it universal, the more you try to make it that it's for everyone, the more you dilute the art and the more it becomes less edgier, less risk taking. It's the more it becomes safe. And so just realize that when you make art, who's it for? And sometimes it's not for everyone. Sometimes this art is for a very particular group of people, and that's it, and that's great. Um, but if you try to fit it everywhere, if you it's like taking a circle and you try to fit it into every shape, like a square and a triangle, like like maybe it might work, but I think at the end you're gonna lose all your edges. You're gonna lose what makes that art special to begin with. So just realize that sometimes when you make your art, it's very subjective, and it may not be for everybody, but for the people that it is for, really treasure that. Like really, when people see our films and they enjoy it, um, you realize it's that, oh, this film that I made or this art that I made spoke to them in some way, and you have to be grateful for that too.
Definitely. And what you say is so true, like the leap of faith. This is something that I think even in philosophy is being talked about in this way, that if you fear looking like a stupid, then
Hmm.
you are not going to advance in life. Because whenever you are learning to do something, you are not doing it very well, so you are going to look like stupid. So
It's
in that
normal.
sense, yeah, it's exactly normal. So you have to be willing to look like that. And even Marcus Aurelius, like this big emperor in back in Rome, says had a quote about like that, like there is a value to being stupid, uh, and not being afraid of being stupid, pretty much. So the way how I see it, and as you just said, and this is I think one of my biggest, and maybe yeah, my biggest unfair advantages is that when I was young, I had a group of friends who were really crazy, like really,
Hmm.
really crazy, and we will do like really stupid stuff for many, many years just for laughs. And I got
Hmm.
hurt a lot of times. And when this series called Jackass came out, those things became way worse because now we had inspiration. And but what I love, uh, looking back, what I loved so much of that series was this attitude of Johnny Knoxville, that he will start the show like, "Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass," and then he will do something really stupid. And obviously, the guys got really, really hurt, but sometimes they did either something completely hilarious or something completely amazing from time to time.
Hmm.
And that is, I think, something that I have never feared. Like most of the amazing things that have happened to me have happened because I come from this mindset of just doing something stupid, like, "Hi, I'm Rodrigo Flamenco, welcome to Jackass, let's do this."
Hmm.
And yeah, sometimes it fails, but sometimes it's something really amazing comes up. And I tell this a lot, like the reason why I think, because people come to me and they think that I'm kind of a genius or something like that, where I'm not. And I tell them, no, 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 I'm not a genius. I'm just stupid enough to try things that the most people will not try because of common sense.
I
And yeah, and that's how the way how I see it.
I mean, that's why I love your story about singing in the rain in the mall and looking like a fool. I think that's so great because I think it's better to try and look like a fool, and you with it comes the high stakes and the high risk, but at the same time the high reward too. So if you're never willing to risk anything, if you're always playing safe and you don't want to look like a fool, you're never gonna experience that the great joy of like having risked something really greatly and then also getting the high reward for that risk. So I think it's amazing that it's great that you can do that and have done that. You know, I think a lot of artists need to stop being afraid and really put themselves out there.
Definitely, definitely. And if people want to find you online, where would be the best place to do so?
Yes, so I am. You can find my website on www.eveskylar.com, and then from there you can look at my Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. But yeah, please feel free to keep in touch, and I'd love to come back and speak with you more about other topics as well.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for being here and giving us your time, Eve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Rodrigo.
So this has been the last episode of the Creative Hustler Show. If you like it, please share it with your friends and also click the like button below. Till next time.